is this coming Monday, January 19th.
No further extensions. You hear? Some ticket outlets include IslandEtickets.com,
Legends, Sports Bar, Point Fortin,
6 Liquor Mart, Bonds Road,
Mileage Mac, Port of Spain and San Fernando,
Fitz Street Market, RMP Avenue,
Mepco, Marabar,
Tony's Hardware, Belmont,
Shane's Supermarket, Aruka,
Hot Shop, Mukarapa Road,
St. James Pharmacy, opposite the Police Barracks,
Anderson Fashion, opposite City Gate, Icebox, Riverside Road, Direct,
Dabity Discount Hardware, both outlets,
Color Shop, Diego Martin and St. James,
Juma Supermarket, Valencia,
MS Food City, Tebe,
Mirage Supermarket, Paget Main Road. Get your tickets now.
Call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802.
Necessity as an art form. That's the simple, basic heights a carnival mat. Understanding what you don't have, but at the same time, figuring out what you do have and patching it together to make it sing. Cover Star, where music history meets its next voice. On WESN, the content capital.
WESN.
This is Sean Michael Small. Welcome to Talking Point. Now, times they are a-changing. And I guess I'll probably sporadically be referring to the second news outlet closure within the last 12 months. I can't remember exactly how long ago it was announced that Loop was more or less closing its doors with regards to its news media outlets. Concurrently, of course, with Sportsmax, and now, of course, Newsday. At the end of the day, seeing the industry shrink, first of all, concerns about current jobs, future jobs. We are educating our population. Are we going to have the jobs to provide them, or are we going to see brain drain? Because, let's be real, if there's limitations in the job market, to some extent, the best and brightest are not necessarily going to be the ones to stay. They might be, some of the ones to leave. And of course, we have our economic issues, and that, to some extent, is also what's making the media landscape shrink. But now I am wrestling with the question, because I don't want the government to fail. I don't want the PNM to fail. I don't want anybody to fail. I think we need to kind of understand that while I get it, I do want to see political competition, but I want to see political entities compete in debate and in the presentation of ideas, not to see political entities compete to the point where, we're going to be relishing in failure and sabotaging, and because failure at this level. Think about TNT as a business, and the board is actively undermining each other and promoting people that are incapable and thus failing, and there might be a whole host of other factors contributing to that failure. Well, where does that leave the company? Yeah, you might win competing against the guy that is your rival because you might be doing better than him, but where does that leave the company? If along the way there's going to be a lot of backstabbing and setbacks and failures and underperformances and so on and so on. So now we have an economy that's in the state that it's in. And one of the issues I have with the PNM was that it looked as though the best they could have come up with is to try to figure out a way to limit expenditure without causing people to riot, and nickel and diming wherever they could. And I was appalled at the lack of inspiration, the lack of original thought, the lack of any sort of long-term plan instead of these piecemeal, by the way, band-aids to try to add up to a proper position, a proper strategy. Yeah, if you want to just keep putting band-aids on the problem as opposed to having a plan to deal with the cancer that is rotting away at us, no amount of band-aids is going to deal with cancer. So somebody was elected in to replace them because, again, the leadership was uninspiring. I'm not sure if we've reached the point where the current leadership is uninspiring. Some people might still be inspired, but I'm looking at some of the measures meant to deal with the economic situation, and it's much the same. We will try to not cut expenditure so that the people don't riot in certain cases, and in other cases, we'll figure out where we could nickel and dime people once again. Now, the fact of the matter is, we need to be prepared for some amount of increase in fines or taxes or what have you, right? The whole situation on some level was not managed properly. So we can't assume that what is fine, that what is already there is good enough. And there's going to be some amount of adversity that we, the population, are going to have to experience one way or the other, whether they add more taxes or they cut expenditure or whatever they do. Right? There's no real way around that. The problem is, I am not confident, based on how and what has been communicated to us, that the best decisions are being made. That's point number one. Point number two, this does not look that different from the other guy. PNM had a property tax. UNC has a landlord surcharge. If you want to waste time arguing the semantics, oh, it's not a property tax, it's something else, right? Because the methodology is different. You could have used different methodology under a property tax. You could have used the same methodology and call it a property tax. So to want to argue the semantics is a waste of time. Because this, like other measures, I think people need to understand. What does it mean for people on the margins to increase the cost of living in this way? Because now, when we heard about the customs and excise for alcohol, customs, foreign, excise, local, so excise, local manufacturing, from what I understand, Carib increased the price of their beers. On top of other things, now there's a report the Bocas is downsizing, they're taking out the bar component. And I won't be surprised if other restaurants and bars are in similar straits. Now, part of the reporting was, I believe it was the Bar Owners Association, pointed to the fact that, hey, around carnival time, a lot of the regular nightlife is going to be less engaged. It's going to have less consumers because people are going to be out fetting. They're not going to be out going to clubs and bars and like, this is something I have witnessed firsthand. It is what it is. But it's something that's known and should not trigger any sort of response of, I need to close up operations because I have yet to recover from COVID. And listen, hotels, restaurants and bars, certain industries, they're probably in that mode still, trying to get back to where they were in 2019. And the thing is, the really big conglomerate-owned or big family-owned, I'm not really sure if there's a big family-owned anything anymore, to be honest, unless you look at the conglomerate and realize to what extent is it a public entity and to what extent it's not. Yeah, those big businesses, yeah, everybody wants to tax them. First of all, we're not seeing them reinvest, and taxing them more is an incentive to not reinvest. That's point number one. Or to further not reinvest, to further take the money out of the country. But also, not everything is about rich people. So with the landlord surcharge, it's not about the rich people renting. It's about the poor people renting and the poor people who are renters. And also the commercial side of it. While I applauded the fact that, hey, P&M didn't want to go commercial, in hindsight, I had to realize and correct myself, well, what about those properties that would technically be for new businesses who are looking at making a loss their first couple of months, years anyway? That's how you enter into a new business, right? You have to be able to sustain yourself for quite some time without making a profit yet. And if you have a situation that's going to increase your expenses, increase your overhead, and that's a fixed cost, meaning I have to pay it no matter what my production levels are, no matter what my stock levels are, I'm going to have to pay this rent. Well, a lot of small up-and-coming entrepreneurs who are trying to create something from nothing, which is what we need in order to help drive more job creation. Because again, the big conglomerates are not reinvesting. Because we have an economy that is not sufficiently enticing, attractive. Now, again, we have to be cognizant that there will be some pain. But dare I say, is this the right pain? We don't know, because we're not necessarily getting, one, any sort of plan to explain how does these things connect to everything else, and two, what is the vision for all of this? Because the revitalization plan has nothing to do with the increased wrecking activity, the increased mandate to give out road traffic tickets. I mean, obviously, right, the TTPS did not increase its manpower, and I'm fairly certain, based on the political talk, it's not as though Trinbagonians only now started to break the road traffic laws. So that's been going on all the time. Now we're going to enforce it all of a sudden, right? All of a sudden there's a need to enforce it. Okay. The alcohol taxi landlord surcharge, none of these have to do with the revitalization plan. So if your vision, if your big plan is this revitalization effort, what's all this nickel and diamond stuff for? Granted, there can be a need for it, but where's the explanation for it? Because now we're in a situation where the TTPS, apparently there was a video, I didn't see it, but there was a video where a woman was trying to, her vehicle was being wrecked, she was asking for a vehicle, they didn't give it to her. Right? And the police had to come out and say, if it's hooked up and any process, it has not been removed, but the driver or the person in control appears and claims the vehicle, the officer shall release. This is the reported wording. I didn't read the press release myself. The officer shall release the vehicle to that person. And I've seen the officers do their job literally on our street corner. So I know that it can happen and it does happen, right? So there are police officers who know how to do their job properly. Let me just say that up front. The police officer came out of the car while the car was being hooked up. He asked around. He didn't just stand there and be like, looking around suspiciously as though he were hoping that nobody came forward. He asked around. He was, and the person came and I believe they released the vehicle to the person and, depending on what offense was committed, gets the ticket or gets prosecuted or whatever the law says that has to happen, but the car is not taken because there's this whole thing about if you don't take your car, there's a storage fee if it's overnight, and then you need because people drive around with this, you need a certified copy of the vehicle. They say certified copy of the vehicle, I assume to prove ownership, right? Again, we walk around with this all the time. But even with that, even with seeing, and this is not within the current scope of renewed wrecking. This was sometime last year. And it wasn't even at a time where like wrecking was at the forefront of the zeitgeist, of the narrative, of the conversation of my mind, right? But there's a corner up by us. People sometimes are worthless because they don't want to go out of the way to find a park, so they want to park at the end of the street. And the police is like, not really supposed to be doing that. So they attempted to wreck. They asked the question. They waited. Well, they didn't wait per se, but they released the vehicle to the owner. Now, I have also seen where the police officer stays in the wrecker, and the wrecker just does a quick pass and out. Almost like if they were trying to do it as fast, they were speed running that thing. So with that, all of that said, despite the fact that I know that there are police officers who are not looking to make up a financial quota with regards to storage fees and wrecking fees and whatever, release fees and whatever. That was a whole thing when the city of Port of Spain realized we paying for the wrecking service, but we not getting any money. I mean, on some hand, yes, that matters if you were still trying to wreck for the right reasons because you're paying to have this thing done, and at least you need to recoup what you're expending. But apparently the TTPS was like, we're keeping this money, which is very interesting now that they're trying to sell us on the fact that this is not an effort to make money. This is an effort about public safety. The problem is there's too much past deviant behavior, both by the members, the wreckers, and to some extent, those members of the TTPS that were negligent in their job, less proficient, as well as poor public relations efforts by the TTPS executive and leadership. Because the last thing we want to hear is what a good job Officer X or Y was doing because they gave out some abnormally large amount of tickets to the general public. Why are we going to applaud that? Why are we going to think, oh my gosh, what a good job you're doing? Because tickets are supposed to reduce behavior, not take advantage of the excess of a behavior. But the inability to communicate when you're trying to prevent people from having a negative perception of you. Please don't hate me for your lacking in what should be basic leadership functions. Because I know that institutionally, it should not be that the TTPS is trying to make a quick buck and the government is trying to make a quick buck. But there's no longer, whether it is due to the previous administration or the administration before that, or generations of poor communication and mismanagement by the political class of this country over the 6 decades plus, that we've been an independent nation, republic. People ain't gonna trust you, period. Your supporters will believe in you unless they get abused too much. I don't know if the coconut vendor was a UNC supporter, a PNM supporter, or an undecided voter, I don't know. But the poor leadership and poor communication can only breed resentment. It's just that we're a lazy country. It took years for the people to finally do something about a government that they did not like in the PNM. And basically it was, well, they voted them out. So in between elections, you could probably get away with a lot of nonsense. But we've reached a point now where after this THA election, I'm going to go back to this point again, and we may speak about this a little bit more with Karen, although this is not necessarily a field that she feels well-versed on and would want to touch in significant detail. But with regards to the politics, of course, she has that experience. So on in the general sense, she does have at least some things to offer. The THA election result should not be a wake-up call, because they should have had the wake-up call already. But stubborn people need to learn the hard way. And what I don't, this is one of the things I don't understand. Everyone tells me that politicians are smart. Even Karen will tell me, no, these are smart people. These are smart people. Well, in most cases, they're smart people. But I swear they don't understand how is it that they cannot prevent themselves from doing some of the most blatantly, basically not smart things. And now, with the THA, there's a situation where they don't even have an opposition, really. And there's already commentary on the risk to the democratic process because on some level, you need the check. That's why we have it in our system in the first place, right? So what do we do when there is no opposition? I thought there was a mechanism to have appointed councillors, more appointed councillors, but I could be wrong about that. I know with regards to Barbados, I think one time Mia Motley's party swept their parliament, and I believe she gave up a seat. Like, that has happened at times. But Tobago gave the TPP a mandate. I don't know if it's a strong mandate. And in hindsight, did the central government have a strong mandate with a low voter turnout? That's something that could be questioned, although I don't necessarily think it's an issue that we should spend too much time on. It's more like an academic curiosity than a practical consideration that must be answered. But now, literally, the PNM has, it would be difficult to see the PNM go lower unless they end up going in the same direction as some of these media houses, having to wind up. Unless they are going to be a shell of their former selves. So on one hand now, who is going to be that reasonable voice to check the government, whether it's central or the THA? Because media is under duress, and the opposition party is slowly losing to the point where it may be a diminished version of itself at best, a disregarded, discredited version of itself. I wouldn't say at worst because it probably could get worse than that. And we run the risk now of a unilateral approach going out of control. Because again, I have yet to necessarily see a true vision to point us in a different direction from technically where we were already going under the PNM. Now, the sad reality is the PNM can't say it because they are part of the cause of where we reach in the first place, but I could say it because it's a continuation. It's the sequel to all the complaints I had on the PNM. Why can't I say it about the current government? Now, they haven't reached the same level. They haven't reached the same degree. They haven't done anything to the same extent. But I'm seeing too many clues pointing towards the same direction. I don't disagree with everything the government does, but the leadership and the lack of communication, that was one of the big things I criticized the PNM administration for. One of the big things I criticized the Dr. Keith Rowley administration for. Now, the Auditor General stuff, that was about communication. The meritless, the Brent Thomas, that was about communication. The mismanagement with regards to Paria, it was kind of about communication, but it was really about the poor decision making and the poor political appointments and the poor management of an important state entity. And that turned up in aspects of communication. I hope that with regards to our current situation, it would be limited to merely communication issues. But I've reached the point where, to what extent do the rest of us who are not UNC supporters, can we afford, can the nation afford to wait? At a time when we need to be fixing things, waiting to see if they will be fixed, can we afford that? That is the difficult question to us, the public. Things like this have no easy answer. My fear is that too many of us are taking things for granted one way or the other and neglecting our own duty with regards to how we should be engaged with the political process. And as the media industry, hopefully this is where it ends, but it might continue to shrink further. And if that happens, at what point will we, the public, stand up a bit more and understand the importance of certain institutions and do our best to engage with them, to safeguard them, to show the rest of the society of their importance, or risk reaching a point where we don't even have a news outlet to tell us what's going on, and this whole ship is flying blind into the night to parts unknown. Rolling of the dice, fingers crossed, but no hope beyond that. Let's take a break. This is Talking Point, Sean Michael Small. We'll be right back with the good lady. Stay tuned.
Hello. Welcome to Cover Star. This is Advanced Dynamics, where it all happened, the scene of the crime. For 4 days in December, this 22 by 30-foot studio turned an idea on paper into real-life reality TV. When these doors were shut behind performers, it was truth time. No audience, no applause. Just the cameras, the crew, and the ones who comment. Our mission is simple: bridge generations and genres. Jog our collective cultural memory. You're inside Cover Star, where music history meets its next voice. On WESN, the content capital.
The countdown has started for the biggest raffle ever in Trinidad and Tobago on behalf of Queens Royal College, valued at just under $1 million for 3 brand new vehicles. First prize is a luxurious Ford Ranger. Draw date is Saturday, January 24th at the college. Tickets only $100.
Final purchase date for physical tickets is this coming Monday, January 19th.
No further extensions. You hear? Some ticket outlets include ICNTT.com,
Bobby's Bar, Belmont,
Better Homes, Front Street and Caroni,
ADM Supermarket, Arima,
Cedric Dookie Supermarket, Eastern Main Road, Dabity, Dobbs Hardware, Diggle Martin Main Road,
ABC Windows and Doors, El Socorro,
Freddy's Bakery, Western Main Road, St. James, and 4 Roads, Diggle Martin,
Mode Alive,
Farmer Supermarket, Santa Cruz,
Sonar Jewelers, Chaguanas and Pinal,
Island Hobbies, Wrightson Road,
The Express, Minimart, Majuba Crossroads,
Stacy Supermarket, Toco,
Leo Rain Hardware, Track Creek Road, ADC Supermarket, Arima. Get your tickets now.
Call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Fan Zone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
In the studio, nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Hello.
Welcome to Cover Star. This is Advanced Dynamics, where it all happened, the scene of the crime. For 4 days in December, this 22 by 30-foot studio turned an idea on paper into real-life reality TV. When these doors were shut behind performers, it was truth time. No audience, no applause. Just the cameras, the crew, and the ones who comment. Our mission is simple: bridge generations and genres. Jog our collective cultural memory. You're inside Cover Star, where music history meets its next voice. On WESN, the content capital.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we cannot have a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
I'm back here on Talking About WESN, the content capital, and I'm joined by the good lady herself who has told me, if it is not readily apparent by my wardrobe choices, we're having a very warm morning, despite the fact that this is the winter time, and I'm sure a lot of you all might have woken up to a very cool morning. We are having a very warm morning here, unfortunately, so please excuse us if, you might take any sort of, umbrage with regards to how things look. But joining me, of course, is Karen Nishishara. Karen, good morning.
Good morning, Sean. Yes, and I told Sean he had to say that because I really can't take the heat. So when I say heat, I mean temperature heat, of course. And so I told him, you better say that to the audience because when they see me fanning myself with my hand, they will understand it's because it's hot inside. It's not warm, it's hot inside here.
Yeah, and this is not the norm, but unfortunately, things happen. And of course, speaking about things happening, a thing happened in Tobago where the results, I'll just say this, Karen, because I remember speaking to Dr. Mohammed. We didn't talk extensively before the election. One of the things we did say was the expectations, right? To say that I don't think anybody would have quite said guaranteed the PNM are not going to win a seat. I think it's just one of those things with elections where, no one expected the PNM to win. But I think there was some reasonable degree of expectations. They'll get more than one seat. right? It's still possible that they were going to lose all the seats, but that wasn't necessarily expected. So to see it actually happen, and I saw it somewhat in real time on Monday night, where one of the networks was projecting 2 seats to the PNM. It was, 2 little seats were red, and then by the end of the night, I blinked and I missed it, and it was all blue, and I was like, what happened there?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also a repeat of what we saw, in a sense, at our national elections in Trinidad. And in fact, yesterday, I have to thank The Guardian, really. They did carry a story giving an indication of how many people were supposedly turned out to vote, which was very, very low, and it is not correct. And in today's Guardian, it has corrected that. But up to yesterday, according to one of the persons to whom they spoke, it was only 12,000 out of potentially 53,000 potential voters. No, it's not as bad as that, but it certainly is about one of the lowest performances. I think it's about 50 percentile. I think the highest I ever had was in 2017 with about 70% turnout. And on average, it has been in 50-something percentile. If you're looking at the article, it says so. I
found another article, so I was trying to skim through, because they were presenting different statistics. The TPP won by 60% of the votes, but I haven't yet found what the percentage of voters compared to the actual total number of voters, to say, what was the level, right, that actually went to vote. I haven't found that from this reporting, but I do find it interesting because you say it's similar to, or an extension of the national,
in a sense, yes.
But even the voting patterns, arguably, except that one could have said the UNC got an increase. It wasn't necessarily a gigantic increase, but it was an increase.
Yeah,
but the TPP, I'm not sure if they had an increase in support, but we've seen again the PNM, their support bottoming out.
And why that is significant too is because, in a sense, Tobago does not have I don't know if the right word is incentive, but in Trinidad, as we know, our politics is very divisive. And oftentimes people will go out to vote because of ethnic, because of religious, because of cultural differences. So that might be the incentive for many people to go out there and vote. When you're looking at Tobago, it's basically a homogeneous population, meaning that its culture, its religion, its ethnicity is basically one. So they do not have the distraction, so to speak, of race, religion, culture, which would impact on your voting, which we know that is a fact for Trinidad. So what we've seen there, I believe, is more a signal, not of being loyal to a particular party that is seen to represent your ethnic
religious, ethnic demographic.
Yes, you're not seeing that. What you're seeing is a disconnection and a detachment. I put this lower than disconnection, detachment that the people feel in Tobago. And I think it started, for one, so for Tobagonian, I don't think they get so caught up in the religious and the ethnic issues, because in their country, that is not really an issue. Yes, we are Trinidad and Tobago, but they look at the tangible benefits to Tobago. They look at what is Tobago getting out of the electorate, what is the government promising to give them. And what they saw with the national budget. National budget, they got $3.7 billion, about 6% more, they got of the total national budget, which is more than is required, at least under the constitutional change that they made. They got a significant amount, and that's, I think, signaled to Tobagonians that their negotiating position was strong, because for both parties in Trinidad to win the national elections, Tobago does play an important part. Winning Tobago is important to both. And for the Tobagonians, I think they've taken a very pragmatic approach to this whole thing. They have Father Augustine, who seems to have a good relationship with Carmen Posada-Bissessar, the Prime Minister, who you can't say she's not a charming person. You just can't say that, which of course he may not be able to say that about Dr. Rowley. You can probably find it difficult to say that about him. So that everything that you've read, in fact, the PNM tried to discourage people or to make people believe that was a negative thing. But to many people, it looked as a positive thing, and they got tangible benefits from it. They feel that there is a cordial relationship. There's not that negativity that so much defined the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago. And I think there's a level of disappointment in Dr. Rowley, because essentially I think Tobago is a rural community, a collection of village communities. And rather than the kind of urban of strategy that we use in Trinidad for campaigning, I don't think that really is the approach for Tobago, you know. I think Tobago, that's my view, and I formed that view when I had Dr. James, when we were talking about some issue with Tobago, and he was talking about medical tourism. And he said that when he came back to Tobago from the United States and was pushing that idea, how he was able to get the impact from the various, it was going to each community, not the community leaders, but the matriarchs of those communities, and you know, speaking with them. And I think that was what was missing, the campaigning approach, which is good for Trinidad, is not necessarily one that you'd want to use for Tobago. And I do not think that Dr. Rowley, all due respect to him, defined or was seen by Tobagonians as our wee boy. You know, A.N.R. Robertson had a certain presence about him.
Connection?
Well, he had a connection, but also presence, because remember he was on the International Criminal Court. He started that, so he had international.
Talking about the prestige.
Yes, and his own manner about him.
That wasn't just tied to his political position.
Yes, I do think so. And then he was very much connected with his Tobago community. They saw him at A.N.R. Robertson Airport. I mean, they did connect with him. I don't know that Dr. Rowley shares that same sort of connection with Tobago people. So for a number of reasons, really, which is what I'm putting forward, when you saw the results in Tobago, what should not be surprising. It's a continuation of what we saw in Trinidad, and I don't know how, now they can get out of it, because there was a time when the PNM had, I think there were 36 seats, and they lost 33 of those seats. And at that point in time, people said that was the end for the PNM. But then you had a good leader. You had a leader that was able to, and who went, by the way, who said, that was Patrick Manning, he said that after they lost, he literally said that he went from town to village and spoke to the people. Where did they go wrong? He didn't have a big meeting. He literally went to the villages and spoke to the people.
I'll say this, I had a chance to be in his sphere when he'd had some short visits to Tobago twice. One of the things I found interesting was he didn't have an entourage, and he was Prime Minister at the time. Right. I know that I know that when he was in opposition, you know, he would spend time with my family in Tobago. Let's put it that way, right? And there was no big entourage. But even as Prime Minister, he didn't go around with a set of handlers and a set of security and a whole motorcade of 6 cars.
And you know what that says? That says he understood the Tobago people. He understood the Tobago people don't want all of that.
Because one of the times it was a THA election cycle, and Over London, of course, is the main speaker. And he's, you know, saying all the things that the PNM did, and he's letting Over London be very much the point man, but he's there to give support. And that sort of reduced presence, you know, not status, not persona per se, but it's not the, oh, look at me, I'm in charge, you know, dressing very simply, moving very simply, but he's still Mr. Manning, but he's there to support Mr. London, and that was around the time in the midst of all the success the PNM had with THA.
And I think that is important. I think, and you know, the expectation, I suppose, that Dr. Rowley would understand Tobagonian, because he lived and he was grown up, he had grown up there, he went to school there. And I think there was a level of disappointment. Also, to the last point that I think I would make on that is that, and it goes back to the budget. It's not only the budget, but the central government, and we spoke about that yesterday, the central government's domination almost of things that were Tobago. The airport was one, the ferry service was one. All the decisions will be made in Trinidad at the end of the day.
So this is one of the things I find interesting, because mathematically, now in the general election, I assumed that it would have been close between the UNC and the PNM, but Tobago would be the wild cards that could, at the very least, swing the decision one way or the other. But as it turned out, no, the UNC won by such a large margin. Mathematically, right now, the seats in Tobago are not needed by the UNC. But I think one of the few times I've seen a politician show long-term thinking. The Kamala Persad-Bissessar, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, is not taking that for granted that, hey, things will always work out and we will always have a majority in Trinidad, so we don't need Tobago, right? So, and that is working potentially to the benefit of the TPP and the THA.
Exactly.
Because we have at least seen some indicators that there's more consultation on central government projects, and of course, they have a bigger budget to do more of their own development projects.
Yes, and I think, as I said to you, she's speaking from experience. She knows 1 minute you're up and the next minute you're down.
Oh,
so
yeah, exactly.
So don't ever take anything for granted. And then Fale Auguste, there is no shoe-in, he's not going to be a person that we take for granted.
But I mean, we've spoken about this though, both in general and now with this result. It seems as though it's hard not to come to to speculate that the PNM took a lot of things for granted.
Yes.
And somehow after the general defeat, they come now to this THA election, and I feel as though the fallout hasn't subsided yet, so and it affected this election significantly.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But and so coming back to your point, I think at the end of the day, Tobago is not distracted by the issues that Trinidad causes us to take positions with respect to our voting. They look for tangible benefits. They look to be treated with respect. They look to be treated with more autonomy, and that's what they're getting from Kamala Persad-Bissessar. And they understand very well that they have a good negotiating position, because Tobago is an important in the end towards in respect of a national election. So it's not a question that, okay, she's going to treat us well this year. I mean, Kamala Persad-Bissessar understands that if she's going to continue to have the relationship she has developed with Tobago, that it has to continue up right through to the national elections, and that Fale Auguste expects that, and Tobagonian people expect that. So that, and I think what you just said is true. I mean, I don't think the PNM, in all due respect, has recovered from the national election. They seem to be in disarray. They seem not to have pulled it together, and so that hasn't helped them. There's no strong leadership. There's no, and also, I think, to be honest with you, I think the voter is tired of the promises that never come to pass. Now, Tobago could say that, but Tobago's in a stronger position than Trinidad to make sure the promises are kept, because their 2 seats end up being very critical to a national election and important to a national party. So they are in a stronger position to ensure that promises are kept, and they have a good relationship on the face of it. And so that whole thing with in airport now.
Yes, the radar. I wanted to get there because Dr. I was going to ask Dr. Moore this is, because it seemed like this was a non-issue, and he said it before I could even ask him. As much as it became a thing in the newspapers and even in the public conversation, it seemed like the voters just didn't care.
That's what I thought from the very beginning. I said the newspapers, I thought, and the PNM, I thought, had no issues that they could really put to the national community, to Tobagonians. So they latch on to that radar, and the radar, and the radar, and the radar. And I said, but they don't get any traction from it. They should not tell them something.
I think one of the commenters, one of the analysts on a Tobago broadcast even brought up the point that people are tired of hearing the PNM blame the other side when it's like, you all were in power for 10 years, right? And that sentiment of, you all need to stop acting as though you all had nothing to do with some of the issues that we have now, right? As though you all have the moral high grounds on things you all were in charge of. And that probably spilled over with the Tobago PNM, because what are they going to complain about? Even though they were out of power for 4 years, I think the worst things you could say about the TPP, you could basically have a mirror and point it right back to the PNM.
It's true.
Right? And there's more baggage on the PNM side. So at that point, why am I going to pick you with more baggage, where the worst that they have done, you've done that, seemingly done that, and more, right? This is their first time out. So regardless, there's 1 or 2 things that I would still like answers from the chief secretary. But be that as it may, that doesn't mean that I'm going to say, oh no, we shouldn't vote for them, because I understand, well, first of all, I'm not in Tobago, I'm not Tobagonian, I don't have a vote, but I understand why Tobagonians are making this decision, because you don't want to go backwards.
No. So I think that about
right, so
up the THA, yeah?
So now we have, well, this leads to the other big news, because we haven't necessarily spoken about it, but it goes to your radar now, right? To what extent is the country being too panicky about the whole U.S. situation and our place in it? And I think one of the things is Karen has a discussion topic that points to the fact that this U.S.-Venezuela thing is not just about Venezuela. And obviously it's not just about us. So on one level, whether you like the Prime Minister or not, you need to give her a certain amount of leeway, because the thing that she has some say in this matter is, with regards to telling the Americans what they cannot do, is one of the most ludicrous things I've ever heard. In fact, all I've seen about the operation that they conducted to take Maduro, they used Puerto Rico, I think they used the Dominican Republic, but they didn't necessarily use Trinidad and Tobago for any significant launching or aircraft staging, right? They did it from other areas. So they don't need us to do these things. But more importantly, the global situation is pointing to something that's bigger than just our
So I don't think that America is necessarily going after the oil, but the oil does mean something to America, and what it means to America, as far as I can see, is its ability to impose sanctions, which brings us to the whole issue of what is it that America wants, and what is it that we, as Trinidadian and Tobagoan, part of the global world, wants from America in dealing with this. And we hear the words regime change. When I've asked people what that means, they're not quite sure what they mean by regime change. Well, regime change obviously means change from what was before. So then I ask them, well, what was before? Because if you want regime change, you're obviously looking to better your situation. You're obviously looking to things that will benefited Venezuela. And what does that mean? So that forced me, in a way, to look back at what was the position in Venezuela prior to the regime change that they spoke about. And the regime change has a lot to do with what was before. And what was before? It was the IMF neoliberal policies. And IMF-backed, I should say, neoliberal policies, which they call it Agenda Venezuela. And that was implemented in the late 1980s, 1989, or thereabouts, into the 1990s. That was what was in place in Venezuela. And it talked about structural adjustment, and it had significant socio-economic impact. So if we are looking at going back to what was, let us see what was and what caused what was in Venezuela that creates the situation today that we're looking at. And when you look at the IMF neoliberal policies, they talk about privatization of state enterprises, liberalization of interest rates, imposition of new exchange rates, including devaluation of the currency, and austerity measures. And what was the impact? Because this is what was in Venezuela. This was Venezuela before what we're talking about, the change that United States in particular has been championing. So what has been the consequence of the neoliberal policies of liberalization, of privatization, etc.? Well, this is what has happened. Implementation of these policies resulted in several negative outcomes that destabilized Venezuelan society, increased poverty and inequality. Poverty rates increased dramatically during the liberalization period from 36% in 1985 to 1986, and by 1990, 2000, income disparities grew with a massive shift in income distribution in favor of profits and away from wages. Decline in real wages rising unemployment from 7.4% to 11.5%, social unrest and violence. We talk about what you want to deal with in Venezuela, which is the corruption, mismanagement. This is what was there before. Social unrest and violence. The sharp increase in the cost of living led to widespread protests and riots, most notably in the Caracazo in February 1989, a violent uprising against the austerity measures in which hundreds, possibly thousands of people were killed in the military, by the military. Political instability. The economic liberalization policies contribute to increasing political instability and decline in state capacity, and as the population became disillusioned with the traditional political establishment. So the point I'm trying to make, and there's much more that you can read on the in terms of how poverty increased in Venezuela, and that is so. If that is the regime change that America is touting that they want for Venezuela, it can't be. It can't be that, because what you're doing, the majority of the people in Venezuela suffered, and so that a lot of these so-called refugees that Venezuela has, they are not so much political refugees. I'm not saying that there aren't any, but it's more economic refugees. So when you see people eating out of dustbins, when you see people not being able to feed their children, when you see an increase in diseases that they thought that they'd gotten rid of, that is a result of America using its power of sanctions to ensure compliance. I am not saying, and we are not saying, and this is not my opinion, this is what is factually there, and the data is there. We are not saying that Venezuela was a stable, economically stable economy, society. No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that because of the use of the IMF neoliberal policies, the people, one, education suffered, which was something that they, that when Chavez came into office, they had a huge increase in persons who are educated. Number two, there was the poverty, nutrition values went up. Clinics, health clinics, there was a huge expansion of health clinics. And so that one cannot say that the majority of the Venezuelans did not benefit when the change came about. So to go back to that, I'm not sure that that they want to do that, which brings me now to why is it that regime change is so connected with the de-dollarization movement. Because de-dollarization, which I've spoken about on many occasions prior to this, is this what is going on in Venezuela? It's not so much about fighting over the oil, who has more oil, you know. It's which countries are going to emerge as being the superpower, the unipolar dominant power in this global environment, in this geopolitical landscape. And that is what Venezuela represents. It is a fight to determine that America has that power. And how does America play out that power? Using sanctions. We are affected by the sanctions. We are affected by the sanctions. Venezuela cannot sell their natural gas from Dragon Field to us, nor their natural gas from the Lauren gas field to us, because of the Office of Fixed Assets Control that has said to Shell International, which is supposed to build that pipeline from Venezuela to the platform in our waters, they have not built it. And the reason they have not built it, because America has said to Shell that if they do that, they will block them from having access to international financial markets. And they have not gone ahead. So when we talk about sanctions, we believe it doesn't affect us. It is affecting us. Because if it weren't for that, I'm sure that Venezuela would sell their oil to Trinidad. They would sell their gas to Trinidad, but they are being blocked. And that is what the whole de-dollarization movement that I have spoken about on several occasions is about. And let me just say what it says, what de-dollarization means, just in case that we, I'm looking for the definition. It's a significant reduction in the use of the U.S. currency for world trade settlement. So you have a trade settlement, you're utilizing it less, and also the foreign exchange currency. What is our foreign exchange reserve currency? It's the U.S. dollar. And therefore, if America wanted to impose on Trinidad compliance, whatever that compliance means. All they have to do is impose sanctions, and so therefore there's a direct connection between the use of sanctions and the de-dollarization movement, which is to reduce the world's dependence on the U.S. currency. So we are seeing that is really, so that Venezuela to a large extent represents that, that geopolitical tension between what is occurring in Venezuela, not so much that America, United States wants their oil. They don't so much want their oil, they want the petrodollar to maintain its currency, to maintain its dominance, because once it is dominant, it can use sanctions to ensure that countries comply. So actually I had looked at it, and they said the use of sanctions by the United States is a primary driver of the de-dollarization movement, as targeted nations seek alternatives to reduce their vulnerability to U.S. financial leverage. The weaponization of the U.S. dollar encourages countries to build financial systems and diversify their reserves. So what are you seeing when we talk about de-dollarization? I'm sure people have seen that the gold has gone up. I mean, the price of gold has gone through the roof. And part of that reason is because countries more and more are using gold as their, what they call it the safe haven asset. Instead of more and more central banks are using gold as their foreign exchange reserve asset rather than currency, rather than using the US dollar. Also, what you are seeing that countries are trading with each other in each other's currency, so reducing the reliance on the US dollar. And all of that is intended to neutralize the impact of the United States, which is what I think Venezuela is really speaking to, neutralize the impact of the United States and its ability to use sanctions in order to ensure that countries do as they decide that they should do. So what are we seeing here, for example? You're seeing, I said you're seeing an increase in the price of gold as more central banks are using gold as a safe haven, non-yielding asset as opposed to the US dollar. You're seeing more and more countries trading with each other in each other's currency. You saw that with Brazil and China. You see now with Nigeria also using metals as a form of settlement of a trade. For example, I think Nigeria...
But also they have their own payment system.
Yeah, the BRICS payment system. What they want to...
doesn't they have an African system?
Yeah, the African payments and settlement system, but also what they're trying to also develop, but they're having problems with that, and understandably so, to develop BRICS currency. So not only are you able to trade in each other's country's currency, which is what the African payment settlement system allows, and what the BRICS countries already do, but they want now to develop a BRICS currency so that the countries who are members of BRICS, which happen to be Iran, Saudi Arabia, and look at the countries who are members of BRICS.
India, Brazil, China.
But what I'm dealing with is the petro countries. Iran.
Well, Russia.
Exactly. I'm talking about Russia. And that is why the de-dollarization movement, which you see BRICS representing to a large extent, took up speak, increases its urgency, was because in Russia, they used the sanctions against Russia. Russia had the United States $300 billion US tied up in banks in England and in Europe, and we were not allowed to access the SWIFT code, which allowed them to transfer that money into their own accounts. So you see, for example, how they use sanctions. Sanctions, as I was saying, it encourages countries to build their own financial system, which is BRICS. But it also sanctions such as the, gosh, I can't even make out my own handwriting. Sanctions such as the freezing of nearly US $300 billion Russian reserve and exclusion from the SWIFT messaging system demonstrate the geopolitical risk of relying on U.S. currency system.
And I just want to point out, this whole shadow fleet, Venezuelan shadow fleet sanction tankers, etc., some of which were flagged under Guyanese flags, and all of a sudden they're reflagged under Russian flags. For better or worse, there's a more active, physical going after this thing. But my point is that this is connected also to some extent to Russia. So when you look at how they're trying to maneuver their financials, the Belt and Road, was
China.
Venezuela had collateral. They were using oil shipments as collateral for Belt and Road. And one of the things that I don't know the answer to is, we can't get Venezuelan gas, but China could somehow legally get Venezuelan oil to finance loan payments and other things. So how does that work with regards to the sanctions? Are the sanctions, are they blankets? Are they limited to only certain people? Did China find loopholes? Are they targeted? Is it that America wasn't so far willing to actively fight against China? Because by basically cutting off Venezuelan oil to China, now that whole financial arrangement is up in the air, and China is one of the countries that is not an oil producer, but it bypassed American currency by doing it this way. We're giving you Chinese currency for oil, basically.
And that's what they did with Nigeria. Nigeria, which has one of the largest reserves of oil in Africa, was agreed to sell to China and accept as payment, not the U.S. currency, which is why they talk about the petrodollar, but to accept for payment for their oil, the yuan, the Chinese currency. So what you're seeing now, I believe that when we're dealing with Venezuela, what you're seeing here, if we talk about the regime change on one hand, yes, and that is what America has been pushing. What do you mean by regime change? Is it going to be better for the majority of Venezuelans? If you look at what was the state of Venezuela prior to the late 1990s, regime change can't be good for the majority of Venezuelans, not if you're looking at the statistics. No, and so you're having, at one end, you have the regime change, which is a critical issue for Venezuela, which I should say, let me just complete that thought. If regime change is more than implementing the neoliberal policies which have not been good for the majority of Venezuelans, if that is what is meant by that, clearly that can't be good. So we need to look at what can regime change mean. Now we have heard them say the liberal policies, democracy in Venezuela, and I don't think you can't dismiss it, because...
But it's in a very weird position, because you're saying there's this whole regime, right? Obviously, Nicolas Maduro was not just a one-man show where he did what he did all on his own, and nobody else in the Venezuelan government was aware of whatever he was allegedly accused of doing, right? But for whatever reason, contrary to a lot of people's expectations, initially, the Trump administration said, we'll work with Delcy Rodriguez and not with the presumed leader of the opposition, Machado, in part because it was quoted from Trump to say that she doesn't have the support or respect to the people, which I find is a very odd thing to say. Now, I didn't want to think it's over the Nobel Prize, but that's still in the news about her trying to give credit to the Nobel Prize to Trump. And this is one of those times where I'm like, buddy, Mr. Trump, President of the United States, like, I understand it might have been something that you wanted, but any man that says they're a Nobel Prize winner themselves probably has a hard time convincing the rest of us that he's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. You know what I mean? That says he's deserving. Somebody has to say it for you. And she's trying to say it for you, but at the end of the day...
She didn't say it well enough.
You know what? I don't think there was any way that she could say it good enough.
No, she just had to not take it. And you know
what?
Well,
okay, fair enough. Yes, maybe that would have...
Yeah. She just had to not take it and say she didn't deserve it.
How he is pursuing it, this is not the way to do it. There's no, and I get it. I could see where he might not understand what I'm trying to say, but I'm like, this does not look or read or sound well, and I have nothing in a contrarian position to even try to begin to say, it's not that bad.
Well, let me just say with regard to that same point you're making, which looked on the face of it to be a good move, to put Machado in, to put Delcy Rodriguez in charge and say Machado was not acceptable because Machado represented all neoliberal policies. But it goes to your point that you are making. Is it possible that the reason why he really did not want Machado is because she took the Nobel Prize? And you can't really say that there's no truth to that. There's no, well, let's
I would not want to believe it.
But many political analysts have said that.
I just have an issue where if Maduro was so bad, how is his vice president, who has gone on the record and mirrored a lot of the things he said, right? That is, Maduro has said. How is it you think you could work with her right? And I feel that is more them trying to have their cake and eat it too. You want to do regime change or whatever on the cheap. That's not how this works. That's why people were saying, even myself, who I don't have a problem conceptually, but I'm saying this is.
You know, I can't understand that.
But my point is, my point is.
How can a president of another country say to another country, we're going to come in there and run your country? How could you say that?
No, well, that's not always bad.
No, but he says it.
But
how could you say no?
Especially.
How could you say that you're going to run the country?
I'm not disagreeing with you.
No, but this is what I'm saying, and he's letting you know in no answer, which is what the whole de-dollarization.
Because the thing is, one of the ways, one of the ways for you to try to attempt to do this successfully is not to take over the country and say we're going to run it. That's a very good way to get the population to turn against you, and you've more or less lost before you begun.
I understand that, and that is why I said, this is when you started talking about the Machado, why he didn't put Machado, which was a good move, I thought, and he left Delcy Rodriguez continue until say she said the bad thing, but she says a good thing. You know, that thing in Venezuela is just not this definitive as yet.
So my thing is not that he should have gone with Machado, right? I'm not sold that his strategy of going with Delcy Rodriguez was a viable alternative either. And in my case, this is a situation where if you had no good options, maybe you shouldn't have done this in the first place. As someone who doesn't have a problem with regime change, I'm saying maybe you shouldn't have taken Nicolas Maduro.
Regime change. I just read out to you.
Intervention.
No, but what do you mean by intervention?
So I take regime change as a change in government.
Yeah, but I just read out to you.
It doesn't have to be those policies.
But what policies do you think that IMF-backed neoliberal policies are going to be?
The policies, this is the thing. The policies should be whatever a new administration wants. I just don't think there doesn't seem to be a new administration to put in.
So this is the point. I was at pains, because we have had that discussion already. Sean and I have had that discussion already. And he has said to me, he's sort of supporting, well, I get the impression he's not against what America's done. And I said, well, how could you support that? Let's see what was there before, and let's see what they want to go back to. And what they want to go back to cannot be good for the majority of Venezuelans. And you're not guessing at, you know. You're not thinking that they might do that, you know. They're showing you that they have done that. So what is to tell? And Machado represented all of that. No, let me just say this. So, but if the regime change means, and I think it does also mean, I'm hoping it does mean that you want a more democratic institution in Venezuela, and you believe that Venezuela needs that. The answer to that is not to go into Venezuela and run Venezuela and take their oil.
Right.
That's not the answer. It cannot be the answer. Cannot be the answer. I mean, that cannot be the answer. What it has to be is call a national election. ASAP. If you do that, it will give America legitimacy, it will give America standing in the international community, and it will give people to believe that America truly represents, it is really the big brother of, in a positive sense, of this, the western part of the world. So what I am saying, Sean, before you
I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay, so what I am saying is that it cannot be we'll go in Venezuela, run the country, and take the oil and gas. It can't be that. And every indication, based on what they did before, is that's exactly what they intend to do. There is no reason to believe that otherwise. If, however, as also has been said, they want to bring democracy back to Venezuela, they want democratic institutions, return to Venezuela, and there is reason to believe that that is also a reasonable argument that America has put forward, because we saw that Delcy Rodriguez, I saw it on television, political prisoners were being released. So it means that people were being imprisoned because of their political views, and that cannot be in keeping with a democratic institution. So to me, the answer is don't say this regime change as if you know what it means. If you know what it means, you could never support it. But if you are understanding it as from the neoliberal policies that were implemented that caused Chavez to rise to power, and by the way, he was voted in democratically, you know. He did not steal the election, you know. And the reason why he didn't have to steal the election was because how harsh the policies were to Venezuela, right? And when you see people eating out of garbage bins, and they're making it seem it's corruption, mismanagement, is because America stopped buying the oil. The price of oil had collapsed. America's 40% of the oil was exported, just like how we do in Trinidad. Just like what we do in Trinidad. They stopped buying the oil. Not only did they stop buying the oil, they told countries that had 90 billion US in banks abroad, and they told the banks that if they released the funds to Venezuela, they would pay a price for that. What are you saying? What are you saying? If the federal our foreign exchange reserves, if it comes down to zero, what food can we import? What medicines can we import? Because the US currency is the global dominant currency of the world. It is a trade settlement currency, which is what is behind the de-dollarization movement, right? So if they were to do what they have done to Venezuela, where do you think we would be? Where would we be? Would we be able to import the food, the 8 billion TT dollars that we spend importing food into this country? Would we be able, the manufacturing sector, that's what they did also with the refineries, because the refineries, the oil is very high sulfur based and very corrosive. They also needed to import the chemicals in order to maintain refineries. They could not import that. Iran was giving them that, was providing them with those fuels. Iran was providing them with the chemicals. America stopped that. So if you do that to a country, what do you expect will happen to that country? So if you are talking about neoliberal, if you're talking about regime change, it just cannot be that, because that cannot be good for the majority. So if it is that you are talking about liberalization, democracy, clearly there is a problem there. There must be a problem, because Chavez, what's his name again? Delcy Rodriguez could not have given instructions to release the political prisoners if there weren't political prisoners. So to me, the simple answer is call a national election ASAP, bring in international agencies, regional agencies to monitor that election, because elections can be stolen. We know that, Mr. Trump, you have said that so many times, so you don't want that to happen. Bring it in so it legitimizes the national elections and let the majority of the people say what they want. That is a democracy. But you can't call it a democracy that you come into Venezuela, intervene in Venezuela, and take the oil and gas because it's yours, because you want it. That doesn't even make any sense.
The thing is, the Americans are not in position to compel that. And
not in position to compel what?
Well, they can't call an election in Venezuela, right? And to say that they're running the country is a very...
They said they're going to.
Beyond being obviously not the thing you say, right? On a practical level, there was no... People had to come out with explanations, say, oh, well, they're running the country by controlling the oil. It's like, you're not really running the country.
You have boots
right?
on the ground. That's what you're letting have.
And I think they don't want to do that. Yeah, my issue is you don't try to do a thing half-baked. Right? You will cause more problems than you would solve. True. If the mission is democracy, then you have to have a plan. Okay, removing Maduro is maybe step 5, but you need to have a plan all the way to the result of democracy. Not, well, we go halfway and then it will work itself somehow. That's when things fall apart. And the whole point about de-dollarization, looking at the geopolitical, the global linkages and the sphere of influence, the growing influence in China, that points to the fact that, as you said, it's not about drugs, and it's not even about American oil companies getting access to the oil. It's about dealing with foreign influence that they don't want, for better or worse, right? And that then now brings the question, to what extent did they put any sort of planning into how do we actually get this to democracy, as opposed to, well, we'll upset the apple cart and it will leave more chaos than what was there, right? And potentially make the situation worse. I have said, despite the fact that I'm fine with intervention, if you leave the situation worse than how you found it, you should not have gone in the first place.
But you know what I can't understand, Sean, and this is what we will argue about. I cannot understand how you can say you found it, you made it worse than what it was before. I have shown you how bad it was.
No, I'm talking about...
What?
I'm talking about not worse than what you found before Chavez. I'm talking about, like, before you took Maduro out, make it worse than what it was. Right? That is to say, the recent American acts, if they go into Venezuela, as they did a thing, attack to Venezuela, leave the situation now where it might end up being worse than how it was a couple months ago, right? We have to wait and see. We have to wait and see. They intervened. Is Venezuela going to retain its stability?
Have they a right to intervene? How about starting there? How about starting
All right,
anyway,
we have a ream on the line. Caller, good morning.
Good morning to you, Sean, and to Ms. Necessary.
Morning.
Now, the question I would like you all to answer: where does Trinidad and Tobago go from here with our OFAC license and the Dragon gas deal? Because, Sean, as I mentioned to you before, Donald Trump seems to be the new Führer. And I would like you to ask any police officer that comes onto the show, is Donald Trump above the law? Based on based on the actions that you see he's contemplating. Because when you look at it, the majority of Americans support his actions. Whether you're looking at immigration, they don't want immigrants in their country. If you're looking at foreign policy, they want to dominate and tell other people what to do. Now, given the state that Trinidad is in at the current point in time, I believe some of our ministers should be in Caracas trying to negotiate the start of this Dragon gas deal, because to our recollection, I think it's 3 months left, right? Because it was given to us for 6 months in October. We're in January. Rolling on. I would listen off here. Good program as usual.
Thank you, caller. I think with regards to the OFAC license, I don't think it's really, I could be wrong, but I don't really think it's valid anymore. And even if we get a deal done within 3 months, you know, we'll run into that issue of, are we going to basically have a disagreement with the Americans on this issue, right? If it's not renewed. If it's renewed, then we won't have to have that disagreement. But if it's not renewed, regardless of what we do with the Venezuelans or whatever, that's kind of besides the point. The problem is the Americans kind of went in, but nothing has really changed, so it's all up in the air. There's no resolution to the situation, so I'm still kind of left waiting like, what do you mean? I mean, to be fair, this is how I think. What do you mean you're going to run Venezuela? Because it doesn't really look like you're running Venezuela. Delcy Rodriguez came out like an hour afterwards and basically said you're not. So is there going to be more military action? Are we going to potentially see the whole state of Venezuela collapse? Are we going to have 10,000 to 100,000 more Venezuelans fleeing in our direction? I don't know. And with regards to the gas deals, the potential gas deals, I think that is the hope. But the situation needs to stabilize first and have a resolution before that hope could even begin to even be explored, much less realized.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the reality, answering the gentleman's question, where does that leave us? I think that is why the Prime Minister has taken the position she has taken. Now, her rhetoric was really very harsh, and I think maybe she needed to tone that down. But again, she probably felt, that the Prime Minister may have felt that that's what Donald Trump likes to hear, and therefore
it was not out of alignment with similar things she said about crime domestically. So I wonder if to what extent the domestic stuff also encouraged her to have this very gung-ho attitude. Not with everything, but with the statement of kill all the smugglers,
and
right? Kill them all. I'm like, because I didn't, when she said on the, before when they were touting stand your ground laws, this is even before the election was called, empty the clip, you know, so she had similar language. Now, with regards to the whole Venezuelan issue, I can't speak to that, but with regards to some of it at least, I do wonder if for whatever reason she thinks domestically this is what Trinis want to hear or over crime.
Well, I think the Prime Minister is taking her cue from Trump, and I think President Trump probably admires her approach, because he certainly is no, you know, he's not one to back down or not to use language that one might consider to be not diplomatic. So I think, generally speaking, maybe the Prime Minister does embrace Trump's approach, because as far as he seems to be winning as we speak today. So perhaps that is what it appeals to her, and which is what the question the gentleman asked. When it comes to removing these sanctions, because that is what the Prime Minister wants. She wants these sanctions removed from Venezuela in relation to selling their natural gas to Trinidad, because Nutrien, for example, which is a huge global player in the fertilizer business and is an anchor tenant at Point Lisa's industrial estate, has said repeatedly that the access to and availability of natural gas and the price of natural gas is some of the major deterrents. Now, if that issue, which we are an energy economy, can be resolved, I suspect that the reason why what a Trinidad can do is, I guess, what the Prime Minister feels that she has to do. And if you notice too, has there been any bombing of Trinidad? No.
Yeah.
Has Trinidad been affected by what America has done? America did aerial bombing. They didn't put boots on the ground, which I think was a surprise. So I think what the Prime Minister is doing is watching the situation. She probably understands President Trump more than we do. And in relation to our position, we need the natural gas. What is going to prevent us from getting the natural gas is United States sanctions. Stay on the good side of America. At least we are taking a risk that is informed risk that we will benefit from that. And I think that is where the Prime Minister is going.
The thing is, the Americans have proved the military side, they could do it probably better than anybody with that whole operation. There's a lot of people who are going to study that. The problem is a military alone solution does not bring a democracy, does not change a country into however you want to change it, right? So I'm still kind of nervous and waiting on how is this going to end, because yes, that whole thing about if the sanctions and this whole thing could blow up in so many different dimensions,
exactly.
And we have taken a stance, and I have no problem with taking a stance. We just, we're not going to get bombed, but it could rhetorically blow up in so many different dimensions. We have Elsa on the line. Caller, you're on there.
Yeah,
good morning, caller. Sorry. Good morning.
Morning, Sean. Morning, Ms. Karen. I just tuned in, so I don't know if this question was asked, but coming back to that THA election sweep, massive coquille broom pass through Tobago. There's a couple of hours or 24 hours ago. Ms. Karen, I just wanted to ask, right? Well, I mean, just before I ask the question, we all know the PNM has requested 2 recounts: the Darrell Spring Wim District and the Scarborough Mount Grace District. I may have missed the assessment or review, but what happens now with this complete sweep in the Assembly? There's no opposition. How does the Constitution deal with that through the THA Act or otherwise? Could you just clear that up? Clear that up for me, please.
I think that happened once before when there was a no vote campaign when Eric Williams was the Prime Minister, and no seats were won by the opposition because I think they deliberately stayed away, and so somebody from the PNM government went over on the other side to represent the opposition, which of course sounds like...
It also happened in the THA before they expanded to 15. This is during partnership. It was a clean sweep, 12-0. And I think Over London wanted to put some mechanism in place. I'm not clear if there was, because I was under the impression that there was a mechanism already in place, or maybe it was instituted when they expanded to the 15 seats, because this is not something, I remember reading something about this, but that would have been back in the last THA election,
so
right?
what they do is put somebody on the government side to represent the opposition.
I thought...
Which is not really...
Well, here's the thing. This kind of seems wrong to me, so I feel like I'm misremembering it. But the opposition, I think both the government and the opposition is technically made up of by elected councillors and appointed or elected aldermen and appointed councillors. The problem is if you have no opposition, who appoints any potential opposition councillors? Do you go with the party that has the next amount of votes? I guess you can do that. And I think the mechanism was to give them more appointed councillors to kind of try to have an opposition, but I could be misremembering that, because the question is up and that's not the answer that's been presented right now. So we have...
so what is the answer that's being represented?
I don't think they have, I don't think the media has presented the answer, so I don't know why. I could have sworn that there was a mechanism, but given the fact that I haven't seen anybody else bring it up, I don't want to say that this is what it is for sure. We do have another call on the line. Okay, oh. San Fernando, caller, good morning, you on the air?
Good morning, Sean. Happy New Year, Karen.
Same to you, same to you.
I want to speak to one issue this morning, which I wanted to I waited to raise it with you, Karen. And let me see what it is. This is the issue of these new traffic fines that they have. Now, I have no problem with the states if they decide that they want to raise the traffic fines by 100%, 200%, even as it is draconian and it is obviously a well-transferred situation that the government is transferring wealth from the private sector or the private hands to public hands, and are going to modern monetary theory there a little bit. However, the only thing I have a serious problem with is this late fee that they have put on renewal of your driver's license. As far as I'm concerned, that is illegal. Let me say why, Karen. Let me put a case quickly here. If it is that a late fee is a charge on payment of a debt. So if it is that I have a loan in the bank and I have my installment to pay every month, and I miss my payment date for my installment, I have a late fee to pay. Similarly, if I have my cable, I have a cable bill. You get the service first and then you have to pay. And if at the end of the month you don't pay, you have a late fee to pay. And there are other examples like that. However, with your license, you pay upfront for your license. Your license expires, you go and you pay for it and you get your new license. And you can decide at the end of your period when your license expires, I don't want to renew this today. I want to renew this year because I might be out of the country at the time. There are varying circumstances for you not wanting to renew your license. But to tell me when my license expires, there's also, if it is that my license expires and I am caught driving with it, there's a charge. There is a charge, a serious fine for you driving without a valid driver's license. So to tell me now that because my license expires on the 20th, and if I go on the 21st, I have $650 to pay at a late fee for renewal, that is rubbish. Wow. Similarly, is there a late fee? Then if you go by that logic, Karen, then you should have a late fee for when you renew your passport. If you miss the date when your passport expires, then you should have a late fee for you to renew your passport as well.
Well, I don't know if I could make the analogy there, because the only reason you would need to pay for your passport is because you intend to travel. But I suspect that if you have not paid your driving license...
Yeah, but then you could not intend to drive, Karen?
Yes,
that's true. There is a charge if they are caught driving without a valid driver's license.
I think the point is the crime kind of already deals with that matter, right? And to his point, while not likely, right? Let's be real, it's not likely, but you can't have someone who says, I don't have a car anymore, I don't need a license right now, or I don't want to drive right now.
Right, so therefore in a case like that, it's not a question of having a late fee because you have no intention of renewing your license. But I don't think, you know what the whole thing is, to be frank with you, this whole thing is about the government finding a way to generate revenue. Mm-hmm. And it has not, and it's their form of diversification. So diversifying many ways in which they can make the taxpayer pay for the revenue that the government requires. And the problem with that, of course, and then they sell that to the public. And yes, people, so that I think the whole issue regarding the late payment and all of that, I don't know if they've thought it out. It's a different situation when you're talking about payment of tax. What their focus is to sort of collecting as much taxes as they can. And one way is to put a fee of a late payment. But I thought I heard the Prime Minister say that she's going to give an extension of time for late payments, so giving people at least a week or so before they have to pay for their, they would have to pay the late payment fee. It's all about collecting taxes. I mean, I don't know.
Money, because people will argue the semantics. It's not all taxes, but it's money.
That's what it is. It's all about collecting money, and that is where I think the issue really is. Whether it is the licensing authority, whatever it is. I mean, people now are telling me they're afraid to drive because they don't know the windshield not working, they're tired, but the roads are coming here, 2 huge potholes, 2 huge potholes. So then you're going to charge me because I have threadbare tires and so on. So the whole rationale, and that is in the Standard & Poor's and Moody, I think it was in Moody's report, their recommendation was to revenue generation by use of taxation. And it is clear that the government is pursuing that because right now, I suspect their fiscal deficit is going to be much larger than they anticipated, and they need to raise revenue. And the quickest way to raise revenue is for
take it on the population.
Well, that is what they're doing. That is what they're doing.
Consider this: you're taking money from the population. That's
what they're doing.
You know, one tax that's probably going to be less if you do that, VAT. If the population have money to spend,
well, they'll find a way. They'll find a way.
They'll raise VAT.
No, they'll find a way. Look at the Property Act. And you know what this whole issue is? I think the bigger issue to me is it means like if you have not been honest with the public.
I agree.
That is what you have not been, because look at, for example, the property tax. You come and you say they will make property tax. What do you think the people think you mean? What do you think they mean that you're going to have a landlord surcharge, which, by the way, is even worse than the property tax, but that is a whole discussion by itself. You have come, and there have been, I've seen a video where the Prime Minister has been castigating the former PNM government for increasing fines on...
that's right.
Yeah, increasing fines for road use and for...
Right. Similar things.
She
called it draconian.
Draconian, and she did. And she said they're trying to tell you that it's all about have safe driving and all that. It's not about that. It's about tax. But you know what? That is what I think is upsetting to people. I think people, whether it's the CPEP, whether it's the URP, whether it is the, well, PSA probably is the only one that's gotten promises kept and promises delivered. But I think, but other than that, I think people feel that they have been misled, and the taxation is one of those things. And I feel people feel helpless in this situation, and the Prime Minister coming forward and giving the excuse that, yes, probably it'll be safer, but I don't know. If you are going to put, that's the last point I want to make, if you want to put that responsibility on me, you have to be responsible for dealing with the potholes, because driving here, there are so many potholes in the road. If you want to say that I have to be responsible, where is your responsibility? And I think that whole issue with the taxation is really a broader issue of the government saying to you before elections, this they will not put up with. I think they said they would not increase the fines. Didn't they talk about that?
I can't remember. I can't remember that.
And I think that is, so they want to, they listen, whatever they have to say that they have to, they need to raise taxes, they need to raise revenue, they need to raise money. And what are they doing? They are diversifying as much as they can the tax revenue.
Mr. Santana, do you have any other points to make? Okay, I'll just say this. I have no problem if we have to take a certain level of hardship. But as I said before, you need to explain this to us.
Yes.
But the other problem is, and I'm happy you pointed it out, right? When you said things in opposition that disagreed with courses of action like this, and now you do it now, how is the public supposed to take it?
Trust you.
To trust you.
We have that is the issue. The issue is one of trust. And I agree with what Shona said. I think the Prime Minister had so much, what do you call it? She had a positive people had a positive
effect in campaign.
Yes, she did. Even after the campaign, people were willing to
Yes.
listen to her. And I think if she had been more forthright with the population, I think she would have gotten far more agreement and far more collaboration than she has gotten today.
Because what did she
People
say at the
don't
first,
trust, you know.
first press conference? She said, we'll find the money.
Yes.
What she didn't say is, we'll find the money from your pockets. We have Gasparilla on the line and a comment directly to this conversation, but we'll take the call first. Caller, good morning. Caller, you need to mute the TV. You're on the air already.
Hello, good morning.
Morning, caller.
Morning.
Just a small contribution. I heard you all speaking about the potholes. We live Gasparilla. My husband went to Point Fortin last night.
Oh boy.
And he was supposed to be home at a certain hour. And he called to say that he got a flat tire. So when he came home, he said, you know, that's a new tire, but if you see the big hole was in the road, right? So you know what I told him? Tell Kamla, right? So, you know, all these things, I agree with Mrs. Teixeira. It's just about taxes. As she said, she stopped the property tax, which I find wasn't bad at all because it wasn't much. Once a year you pay that. And as I told my friend, probably you could put aside every month and make up what you have to pay for the property tax. But these fines, some people cannot pay these fines. They cannot pay. Yes. And that is what she should look at. She should look at it. This is not, I don't vote, but I don't think that this is what the people voted for. I really do think so. Goodbye. I am enjoying your show.
Thank you, brother. And I'll just like to say this. First of all, that has happened in town where you have potholes that bad. However, I have seen Moruga. You can have bad potholes in town, but bad road conditions, as in you're not driving on a road. Some of the citizens in the country, and to the south, to the east, etc. Like, it's beyond ridiculous. Now, to be fair, that wasn't the current administration's responsibility. I'm talking about a couple of years ago, right? Right? But
look at how they have increased them.
Now, and you know what? That's a good point. If the property tax was so bad, what about the coconut vendor that has 19,000?
You know, how you can be driving without insurance? I mean, if you drive without insurance, I don't know the gentleman, but I heard that he didn't have insurance. You know what that means? If he goes and gets in an accident with someone, who is going to cover that person?
Fair enough. But I think it points to the fact that if you want to say there's so much law breaking, you do have to, at least in some cases, put things in place to give the population a chance to adjust to the, or you want to enforce everything now, you weren't enforcing everything then, TTPS, you didn't enforce everything.
And it's coming like a deluge coming at you at every point.
Because when the police say reckon it's about safety, what about when it wasn't reckon? It was,
you know, I had to tell you this, you know, I watched your program on Monday, and when that gentleman, I mean, he was very good speaker, and he could tell you all the reasons why you should not be on your cell phone, all the reasons why ladies should not be putting on your makeup, all the reasons why, and they had a lovely long conversation about that. But that was not the issue, you know. The issue is that people feel that they are being taken advantage of.
But that wasn't his perspective.
He was did I not say he was very good? I said he was very good, but the conversation was about all the ways that you can break the law.
But his job as a member of the TPS was to give us that part. And the media masters do a good job. But listen, can't fault him for that other part. That's above his pay grade. We have a call on the line. Caller, good morning.
Yeah, morning. I called in to talk about, you had a caller earlier, they're talking about the renewal fee is too high for your license and so on.
Yeah.
But you see, when somebody has an expired license, the citizens are driving in the public road who are abiding by the laws and so on, and they hit your vehicle, you will get nothing because insurance wouldn't cover that. Right?
Okay.
That is the truth. And if somebody should get damage in the other vehicle, the person wouldn't even be covered by the insurance.
But caller, the Mr. San Fernando brought that up. This is an improper way to address that situation. Because you could, first of all, if you have those concerns, there's the criminal law, And if you think the criminal law is not enough, you should then continue to...
But how it is you're
because
going to deter the masses?
Caller, you deter the masses with criminal prosecution. Because here's why. First of all, if you could catch them with a late thing, you could catch... The problem is, as Mr. San Fernando brought it up, the timing of the renewal of license, right? Just because I didn't renew my license doesn't mean I drove without it. Now the state is, your argument is the assumption that I'm driving without a license. Some people might say, well, my license was renewed, so I can't drive until I renew it, and I'm late. But that doesn't mean that I drove.
Listen, I called to raise my opinion because I believe there's a show that you
No,
share your opinion, right?
I
didn't call to get your opinion. I called to give my opinion.
Sure, but I am pointing out...
I don't know. I understand. I hear everything. But I want to give my opinion as a driver. So we just went through not having a license and you don't get claims from insurance and so on, right? But how much people at the end of the year does decide I'm not going to drive for a week or a month versus for how much people continue to drive? There must be a deterrent.
Yeah, I think...
The masses are the drivers who continue to drive. So there must be a deterrent for the ones that become reckless. Yes, there might have people a few that don't decide to drive or not in the country. But you must have a deterrent.
Yes, but this is not...
to protect the law-abiding citizen, the mass majority who abide by all the regulation, from the reckless ones who don't care about renewing and so on, you need to have these stern measures.
I think, can I just say before, can I just say,
because how else would you deter a guy or a woman?
You arrest them for driving without a license.
What?
You arrest them. It is against the law. There is a criminal law.
So what you say is every day the police had to get up and search everybody to see who license expired?
Well, on some level, caller.
That's what you say.
So what you're saying is the crime of driving without a license should not be an issue. Then we should just take that crime off of the books. Because we'll have no expectations of that crime being enforced.
No, but you want to put a safety measure for the mass majority of society that's abiding by the laws.
I understand
that. And that is a safety net.
Yes, but it is an unfair safety net.
Can I ask Sean,
because it presumes guilt.
Sean, can I understand, are you saying, I'm trying to understand your argument. Sean is saying to you that there is a very punishment for driving without a license, and that is imprisonment. I don't think you can get any harsher than that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is to prevent people from not renewing the license and abiding by the laws, and to prevent the court being clogged up with reckless drivers who will renew the license and so on. This is a security measure that protects the law-abiding citizen in the mass majority.
Can I just hear
but you are presuming that everybody is going to be an unlawful driver.
I am presuming that the mass majority of citizens are lawful drivers, and just a few would disrupt the whole entire country.
You have a policy that is a blanket generalization that is going to be applied the same way.
It's no different from you getting life in prison if found with a gun. It is no different. It's a deterrent. So you know how much people are going to say,
call a life in prison because I have an illegal firearm is a criminal matter that is dealt with via criminal prosecution, not a renewal fee and license in office.
That is to protect the masses of law-abiding citizens.
Right? Can I just ask you, because I'm getting a little confused and I genuinely wanted to understand. Are you saying that paying the late fee or fine is a good measure rather than using the deterrent of imprisonment?
Because when you have a driver's license, you're permitted to renew a license 30 days before it has expired. No, in Trinidad, it have plenty people is get up and say, I do business, I ain't going to renew nothing, I could drive. License, don't drive. Right? But versus those people, versus the law-abiding, is a few. And those few tend to cause havoc and chaos, death and destruction to the society. So there must be a deterrent. So instead of you having to do so, and have to face paying $600 on a late fee. Best you go and do it early. So in case you get in an accident now, or you damage somebody's vehicle, your insurance will cover everything legit. So it is a good deterrent, and you have to look at it from the point of protecting the mass majority of law-abiding citizens.
Well, I think Sean's argument
so
is
instead of saying is a method to collect taxes.
Okay,
thank you. Like, I'm not saying that you're wrong on the motivation, but I am saying that procedurally, legally, I'll be surprised if it can stand up to a court if someone legally challenges and the judge says, oh, it's fine. Because democratically speaking, and I get it, you either don't want to see it this way or can't see it this way. But democratically speaking, you are infringing on the rights of people by assuming guilt. And if you allow this precedent to stand, then a government will say, well, we need to put other things in place to prevent delinquent behavior, right? Things that will further infringe on individual rights. And in this case, it's your right to say, well, I don't have a car anymore for whatever reason. Why am I going to pay any money to renew my license now?
Yeah, but you can always challenge it in a court of law, you know. If you have been fined and you say that the fine should not have been...
well, that's my point.
So you would have gone to the court. So they do have access to the...
Because you cannot assume that everybody that's going to be caught with a late fee were people who are going to be reckless in their driving, right? And if it's the case where insurance is not... If it's a case where insurance is negated, then perhaps we need to look at exactly how insurance works in cases like this to try to alleviate that problem some other way, because this is an issue that will be a precedent that will indirectly speak potentially to other things by saying, oh, we could use a fee to enforce compliance with regards to criminal matters in such a manner where the fee technically is not justified because it is a fee that assumes guilt, which was Mr. San Fernando's point. So you see a need, and I'm not saying that the need is not valid, but what I am saying is trying to solve it this way opens up a can of worms down the line if the government thinks, oh, well, we did it here, we could continue doing it, because the basic principle of it, I have an issue with, right? And I assume on some level you kind of see that why not just use the criminal code? If the criminal code has deficiencies, fix the criminal code. If the police...
Because it's all about collecting taxes. It's all about...
Well, there you go.
I think that's what the whole thing is. I understand what the gentleman is saying, but unfortunately, the whole way that this has been ruled out and the way that has been presented to the public and the kind of... And it seems very harsh and it seems uncaring, actually, because there are a lot of people who are not working, who that fine does make a big difference to them. I think it is the whole issue that, your point, you do have a good point, but I think Sean also valid. There are other ways to enforce compliance, and enforcing compliance doesn't have, and it can be as punitive or as harsh or as effective or more effective than what the late payment of a fee. So I think what the government needs to do, and it is losing a lot of support in that regard, what the government needs to do, the Prime Minister needs to do, I don't know, maybe it's too late too. I really don't know if it's too late.
And some people might just say, I'll pay the late fee. Because if you're relying on the late fee than criminal prosecution, that's a lot easier than criminal prosecution.
When you have something on your, for getting a visa, you don't need anything of a criminal prosecution on your record, you know.
Here's a different solution. Okay, there's no insurance, but we'll fine you to pay for the repairs of the other car. That's more than a late fee. Right?
But then that all becomes very complicated.
I know, yes, that also.
Procedurally, you don't want to complicate.
We have some comments to get through. I know we're over time, but first of all, and this goes to what Karen is saying, when all is said and done, the unemployed, employed, retired should always be able to meet the basic cost of living expenses. No one should be regarded as the less fortunate in society. And I guess the general sentiment, I agree with you. That's my concern, that money is being taken from the public, and those at the margins, the ones that can't afford these increases, are going to be feeling it, right? In order to finance.
It's not a good feeling. It doesn't seem as though the government cares. I know you try to sell it that you're doing all this thing because you care, but it doesn't come across as though you care.
Especially when you have to finance. When you have to finance a political promise to your now favored political union. Let's take the next comment.
Oh my God.
Tell San Fernando, keep voting the PNM, you'll get a free pass as usual. Here's the thing, he's made...
I don't say that at all.
Exactly. He has made similar criticisms with regards to the Rowley administration.
Absolutely.
Similar to Karen, similar to myself. So to pull this out, because I get it, some people want to take sides and decide that they choose cannot do anything wrong. Time out.
No, not at all.
We apply the same criticisms that we did, and that includes Mr. San Fernando, to the PNM, to the UNC. That is fair.
Yeah.
That is fair. And unfortunately, it is what it is. We cannot report on sunshines and rainbows if we cannot yet see some. When they had the revitalization plan, I was positive over it. But listen, that is right now concept art and a pie in the sky explanation, right? We have no details to properly assess that. So it is what it is. We can't go any further.
But anyway, the point is that to support what Sean is saying, I don't think you're being fair to Mr. Sanfran. I think he's been fairly objective.
In fact,
and he has been critiqued both the PNM and UNC. I don't think that would be a fair statement. Now, there are others who call in that you are very clear where they stand, but I don't think you can say that about Mr. Sanfran. In fact,
he was very negative about the PNM government.
You know what I think it is? When you have a strong point of view that people have to respect, that is the one you go after, because there have been callers say you are very clear where they stand, and sometimes what they're saying is not rational. But one Mr. Sam who says is very objective, and maybe that is why you have decided to identify him. I don't think that's a fair comment.
So we have one last set of comments to go to. Trini people don't mind doing business in Trinidad. Let Trump do what he have to do. He is the boss.
Oh my God.
I mean, listen, I have no issue that we are concerned because it affects us. We have to be, we can't just ignore it. But let's not act as though we have control over it more than whatever little control we have on our own lives, on our own country. So much things to talk about in your own country, but they study in Venezuela and US.
What is that about?
And you know what? Because I did say this in the past, when something happened with Venezuela and a commenter or a caller was concerned, and I'm like, listen, we could only control what we can control. That said, we can't just bury our head in the sand and say the Americans will do whatever they want to do and not have, follow it, have concerns about it, stay updated with it, because we need to be prepared for whatever happens. And with that said, though, let Trump do what he has to do. He is the boss. Listen, he's president of the United States. When you start to get into the territory of he's the boss, then you start to get into this kind of informal language that is going down the, right? And there is international politics has even more a morality of its own. I get that, because I want to close with this. The caller that compared Trump to Hitler, I'm like, hold on. Whether you might not like somebody, but let's not go to the last extreme end of the descriptions, right? Whenever we don't like somebody. Because what happens is you leave no room then in the debate for better or worse, right? And Trump is not the first politician, leader, head of state of a major nation that has done very questionable things, unfortunately, right? To what degree can we figure out a way to get that out of international politics? I have no idea, because politics has a morality of its own, and international politics is a whole other kettle of fish. And I have just reached a point where, as much as I can't control it, whether I accept it or not is not going to change it. But I'm not going to now try to act as though I have some mountaintop spot to debate about it that would actually do something about it. There are things that Trump does that I wish he didn't say, things I wish he didn't do, but I could mainly focus on TNT and what we could control. So it is what it is. Is he Hitler? I mean, if he is Hitler, then there are a lot of Hitlers. I don't like drawing that comparison. If somebody did what Hitler did, well then, that's all other kettle of fish. There are many warmongering people or less than great people or questionable people throughout history. We don't have to go to that extreme of an analogy, right? Because then all of a sudden then we'll start to say everything is Hitler, and things get even more polarized and things get more vilified, and then political violence comes into place, because that's what we're fighting against, because it'll happen, and it'll happen here too. So I don't have time to go more into that. People might think I'm defending him. It's not about defending him. It's about, let's leave certain genies in the bottle until we have to bring them out, because we don't want to go there, right? Believe it or not, that is not an easy thing to just throw out and say, or it shouldn't be. With that said, thanks to the callers, thanks to the commenters, thanks to Karen for joining me once again. Hey, never a dull moment.
No, I'm telling you this, this 2026 is definitely, I have to see, is this a new show? I don't know, but oh my goodness. Wait, no, I have to say that, Sean.
What you mean?
2026.
Well, a new year, and I was going to say, I'm not accustomed to the new year being this busy. But then again, last year we had a whole state of emergency being declared and commissioner being arrested, so maybe I should not have been surprised that 2026 was not going to allow itself to be outdone by 2025. So with that said, folks, we have a time, so have a good day, stay safe, remember your allegiance to the public and to each other. Don't stress out unnecessarily about what's going on, but keep abreast of what's going on. We should all be more informed. And listen, I still hope for the government to succeed. We're not hoping for them to fail, you know. But we'll call a spade a spade. So until then, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Good morning and welcome back to Dollars and Cents. Now, on this episode in particular, I'll be talking about business insurance. And business insurance is an area or a topic that I take very seriously, and I think a lot of business people in Trinidad and Tobago, small business owners, don't see the importance in it. And to help support this conversation, I have a guest with me here, Mr. Amit Das, right? He is